Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever it is that you are joining me from. It's another beautiful Saturday that we gather here to do what we do best every Saturday. It's another opportunity for us to be able to reflect on the things we reflect on every Saturday at a time like this. Welcome to Money Live, where real financial conversations happen. Financial conversations that many would rather not have, but conversations that we must have nonetheless if real financial transformation is something that we are looking forward to. Right, so I'm excited once again to be with you this particular day so that we can progress conversations that we've been having in the recent past and be able to move them to another level. As usual, if you're new here, take a moment to hit the subscription button. Remember to hit the notification bell so that you are not left behind every time we go live on these conversations, and every time we upload a new video, you may be able to catch the conversation. We are still progressing the conversation we've had, where we are opening our understanding to the realities of the good, bad, and the ugly of the world of debt. Right, and so, like I promised, this is going to be a longer session, a longer series than the other series that we've had in the past, the series on debt, because it's a huge conversation. Many people today are confused because of debt. Many people are trapped more than they can care to admit, and for that particular reason, then we are going to spend some Saturdays just opening our understanding to this particular conversation. Feel free to utilize the comment section to express your feeling on this conversation, to be able to ask a question if you have any. Feel free to utilize the number that is scrolling on your screen. You can text, you can WhatsApp. If you have a comment that you wouldn't want to go public on the comment section, and I will be able to give it attention, I will be able to respond to it, I'll be able to mention it as we progress in today's conversation. Feel free to also invite a friend. Feel free to share this link with someone else so that then we can continue to learn together. So once again, thank you so much for finding time to keep me company this particular moment so that we can continue with this conversation together. So today we are wrapping the conversation on the effects of the trap of debt, the effects of financial struggle on your health, for those that might be joining this conversation for the very first time, we have looked at the effects of financial struggle on your physical health. We have looked at those effects on your mental health, and that was last Saturday. And we really talked a lot about how your financial struggles begin to affect your mental health, the dangers that surround the struggles, especially where your mental health is concerned. And today's conversation then builds from that, and we get into the conversation that we are calling emotionally trapped. And so today we're beginning to focus on the effects of the trap of debt, the effects of financial struggle on your emotional health. So what we were doing last Saturday, we were looking at the effects of your financial challenges, the effects of the trap of debt on your thoughts, on your thinking health, on your thinking part of life. But today we are looking at those effects on your feeling part of life. How do they affect the way you feel? How do they affect the way you perceive your feelings? Right, and so that is why we have gathered here this particular time to be able to reflect on the same. Once again, thank you so much. I already can see. Right, someone here is saying I'm tuned in. Thank you so much. Another one is saying I've joined in live from Dubai. Thank you so much. All right, so thank you so much. And we head straight into this conversation so that we can begin to see how our financial struggles begin to affect the way we feel. Now, many scholars have concluded that emotional health is a subset of mental health, right? And it's just that I chose to split so that last time we spoke about the way we think, what affects how we think, and the impact of the thoughts that we come up with, and how the quality of those thoughts begin to affect our lives, right? And so then we progress and look at now the feeling part of us. What affects how we feel, and what is the relevance of how we feel on our lives, and especially where money, excuse me, especially where money is involved. Okay, so the truth about life, and which is common to us, is that we all have got feelings. We all feel certain things, okay? We all have got feelings, and some of these feelings have been described as positive if they leave you feeling good about your environment, feeling good about yourself. And they've been described as negative if they leave you drained, if they leave you hating the world, hating others, if they leave you wishing that whatever has happened did not happen, right? So we go through these feelings, what are also called emotions, every other time in life. So we are constantly feeling something as human beings. Just to give you examples of the feelings that have been considered as positive, this list is not exhaustive. You might be able to add whatever other feelings that you might consider positive. You will have feelings like amusement. You will have feelings like adoration. Yeah, when you feel that you adore someone, you adore something. We have feelings of is it or awe? Right? We have feelings of interest. When you show interest in something and something begins to interest you, you get excited about it, and excitement, like I've also mentioned, is another positive feeling. There is the feeling of desire, when you just want to desire to do something, to have something. That becomes a feeling that has been associated with positive results. There's a feeling of gratitude, right? So you're just feeling thankful. Something has happened in your life and just feel thankful, right? For you to feel thankful, it means that something has happened that you appreciate, okay? And that begins to be a good feeling. There's the famous feeling of love, this feeling that we've not been able to find adequate words to describe. The feeling of love, okay, is also a positive feeling. There is the feeling of happiness, okay. There's the feeling of happiness. Many times you hear people say, I'm not happy. You hear others say, I am happy, okay. But one thing that remains constant, which I have mentioned in previous episodes, is that happiness becomes your job, and that no one will give you happiness, and therefore no one will also take happiness from you. There is also the feeling of calmness, okay, the feeling of calmness. You just feel relaxed, you just feel calm. It walks hand in hand with the feeling of peace, okay. So you just feel you're peaceful, and peace is priceless, okay. There are very many people today who do not have peace, and if there is one thing that the trap of debt will rob from you if you're not careful, is your peace, your inner peace, okay. And there's a feeling of joy, right? The feeling of joy, Some of these feelings are synonyms to the other. Some of them have got a thin line between them. And there is a feeling of satisfaction, okay. You just feel satisfied. You just feel contented. You just feel that you're fine with things as they are. even as you continue pursuing bigger things, but you are currently okay with things as they are. You're not killing yourself, you're not pinching yourself hard because probably things are not the way you want them to be. But while you focus on ensuring that they are the way you want them to be, you are contented with things as they are today. Right, then there is also another interesting feeling that has been described as a positive feeling, and that is the feeling of sexual desire. The feeling of sexual desire. Those that have had this feeling before tell me that it's a very interesting feeling, right? What you will do with it is also something that we must be cautious about. What you will do with the feeling of sexual desire can also be positive or negative, but the feeling itself is a very interesting feeling. So I believe, so I understand, and so I know, right? Then there is the feeling of serenity is also the same as the feeling of peace, the feeling of calmness, and so they work together. And there are very many others. Feel free to use the comment section to add any other feeling that you consider positive feeling, even as we go along with this conversation. And then there are also other feelings that have been described as negative. They leave you with a bad taste in your mouth. They leave you hating situations. They leave you hating people. They leave you wishing that certain things didn't happen. They leave you wishing that certain people didn't cross your path. They leave you wishing that happenings that you have encountered didn't just occur the way they have occurred, right? And permit me to just also mention a handful of them. Feel free to also add to the list on the comment section. We've had the feeling of anger. Anger is a very serious feeling that has been described as negative. Anger happens to all of us, okay? But what it will leave you with, or where it will leave you, or what you do with it after it has visited you is also what matters most. So we all encounter anger at some point, but your ability to be able to identify it and manage it is what we are talking about today, is what we are talking about, what we are calling your emotional health. Your emotional well-being is largely your ability to identify these emotions and be able to manage them, be able to deal with them. Okay, like we'll be seeing shortly, someone who is struggling financially may not have proper ability to even identify their feelings. And that's why when you ask them how they feel, they'll be telling you, I don't know, I'm not sure, right? I feel like this. You know, I'm sure you've had such things. There's also the feeling of confusion. Right? You're torn between certain choices, and so you are confused. And that's a feeling that also will not leave you at a better place. There's the feeling of contempt, disliking heavily certain things or certain people. Okay, there is also the feeling of disappointment. This happens when your expectations do not happen the way you wanted them to happen. Right? You expected certain things to happen in a certain way, but they chose to happen in a different way, or they chose not to happen at all. And that leaves you disappointed. Right? There are very many people disappointed by life today for various reasons, but specifically because of what we are talking about, for financial reasons. Probably things have not just turned out the way they wanted financially, and therefore they are disappointed. There are many people who would have wished to do a lot of things, but because of financial constraints, they have been left disappointed, right? There's also the feeling of distress, okay? The feeling of distress. You are not settled. There's pressure on you. You're feeling like the demands from society are bigger than you can supply, right? Then you find yourself getting distressed. There's also the feeling of fear, okay? Sometime back, I also described fear when I was explaining to you enemies of financial progress. And I spoke at length about how fear is a big enemy of financial progress. If you're new here and you haven't gone through that conversation, feel free at your own time to just look for the conversations that are called Enemies of Financial Progress. There are 4 of them where I was sharing with you 16 enemies of financial progress. I was sharing 4 per session, and I gave you 4 sessions, 16 of them. In the middle of them, you will find fear as one of the enemies of financial progress. And that's a big thing. So the feeling of fear is also a feeling that is heavily negative, right? Even though to some little extent we say fear can be positive, especially where it is cautioning you about things that are bound to affect you negatively, things that are bound to harm you, right? But largely, that is a feeling that is associated with negativity, because many times it leaves you grounded. Like I mentioned the other time, fear is very effective to the extent that it can stop you from taking action. And so when fear visits you, chances are very high that you are not likely to take action, the action that you need to take to better yourself, to improve your life, to improve your financial story. And therefore, when fear visits you, it leaves you grounded. Okay, it leaves you just there doing nothing because you are afraid. You can't take any action, and that's a dangerous thing to happen to anyone, right? There's also the feeling of bitterness, and many people today are feeling bitter for various reasons. Okay, things didn't turn out the way they wanted. Things are not happening the way they thought things would be happening, and that leaves them bitter. The world is full of bitter people. If you look at what is happening on social media, people are constantly recording, constantly posting statements that would show you how bitter they are with life, how bitter they are with one another, how bitter they are with situations around them, right? And those are negative feelings, okay? One thing I must mention at this early stage is that the more you allow negative feelings to stay with you for long, the more they will drain you emotionally. Okay, so negative feelings are there. They will visit us in different proportions at different timings. But when they happen, we have said that your emotional health is your ability to be able to identify them. Okay, so you should be able to identify when they visit you. You should be able to know when you are angry. You should be able to know when you are confused. You should be able to know when you're facing fear. You should be able to know when you're stressed. And once you identify them, then the conversation does not stop there. Then you should be able to go ahead and be able to manage them, right? Be able to control what they will make you do or make you not do, right? So a lot of people are going through bitterness. There's also the feeling of sadness, okay, for various reasons. Bad things have happened to you and you feel sad, okay? You feel sad that things are not happening the way they're supposed to happen. You feel sad that things are not rolling the way you would want them to roll, and that becomes a very dangerous thing. There's also the feeling of boredom. You will hear people say, I am bored, okay? And many people also get bored for various reasons, right? So boredom is also a negative feeling because it leaves you weighed down, it leaves you drained. There's also the feeling of disgust, okay? Disgust, you're expressing displeasure with certain things, with certain occurrences. Okay, so many people also get disgusted about things. And as we go about life, we meet situations that are disgusting, okay, that are not pleasant to our eyes, are not pleasant to us generally, and we feel disgust, okay? But you realize that staying disgust for a long time is very draining, okay? Then there's also the feeling of pain. And people go through different measures of pain for various reasons, okay? Some people go through physical pain, okay? They have been injured, something has happened to them, they've fallen, they've knocked their toe on something, someone has hit them with something, and that becomes physical pain, or they've just been injured and or something has happened, or they're sick. Okay, and so they feel pain, physical pain, right? There is also emotional pain where um, people feel hurt. Okay, people feel hurt for various reasons, because other people have said bad things about them. Uh, People have done bad things to them, and when they think about it, they feel emotional pain. They feel internal pain. This kind of pain is even more dangerous. Physical pain is bound to subside with time as whatever is it that has afflicted the pain gets away. The emotional pain is associated to your thoughts. It's linked to your thoughts, right? And that's why I said many scholars, many psychologists agree that emotional health is a subset of your mental health. You cannot effectively divorce the two. Right. We also have the feeling of horror. Okay. When something horrific happens, something scary happens, it leaves you horrified. Okay. And that is not a very positive feeling. There's also the feeling of hatred. Hatred, right? Many people are full of hatred. We can see that, we can feel that from the way they speak, we can see that from the way they look. Sometimes, if you carry hatred, it begins to be written all over your face. And that's why you will constantly be meeting certain people whose faces are constantly frowning. Okay, not because that is how they are constructed. No, but something happens. If you're full of hatred, if you feel full of bitterness, in the fullness of time, it gets written all over your face. Okay, so you begin to meet these people who are constantly frowning, these people who are constantly just looking like they want to hit someone. Given chance, these guys can probably easily even kill. All right, they're constantly wishing that bad things happened to people. Unfortunately, again, the universe has been structured in such a way that for people who are full of bitterness, people who are full of hatred, especially, uh, get frustrated a lot of times because they are wishing bad things on people, and many times that disappoints them because the bad things they are wishing would happen do not happen. Okay. Then there are also people who go through the feeling of jealousy, right? Good things seem to be happening to people around them, and that begins to disturb them, right? And so they would wish that those things happened to them and not to the other people. And that begins to cause trouble to their emotional well-being. And so jealousy is another very heavy thing. I would want us to look at these negative feelings as some very heavy load, some very heavy weight that has been tied to your legs. So every time you want to move forward, there is a weight that is pulling you back. There's a big weight that is not allowing you to progress. And that's a weight that must be dealt with. That's a weight that must be delinked from you so that you can be able to make progress in life, whichever area of life you're looking at. Permit me to tell you three things about people who are emotionally healthy. Three things about people who are emotionally healthy. But before then, I can see a few messages in this other inbox. Feel free to also utilize the comment section. Let me know what you feel about this conversation. Let me know if you're able to get me loud and clear. Let me know if you have a contribution to what we are talking about today. Someone here is saying that today's conversation is a timely conversation. Thank you very much. Someone here is saying, I used to be emotionally trapped for a long time. I am glad I got liberated. Thank you so much. Someone here is saying, the world is reeling in emotional pain. Wow, I agree with you. Someone here is saying, many people have taken to social media to vent, to vent, to express their emotional pain. Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for those messages, even as we progress with this conversation. All right. So, three things about people who are emotionally healthy. People who are emotionally healthy will be aware of themselves. will be aware of themselves. They'll be self-aware. Okay, how well do you know yourself? How well do you know your emotions? Okay, we said emotional wellness is about identifying your emotions and then managing them. You cannot manage them if you cannot identify them. Okay, so for you to be able to identify them, you must be aware of yourself. Unfortunately, there are very many people who are strangers to themselves. They have not taken time to internalize who they are. They have not taken time to understand things that happen around them and how they perceive them. They've not taken time to understand, to appreciate how certain changes in their environments affect them. The best place for you to begin your journey of personal transformation is at the point of self-awareness. How well do you know yourself? Is a question you must answer. How well do you know yourself? You can only be able to manage yourself if you know yourself. And that's where this conversation needs to start from. And you need to spend some time to just begin to appreciate yourself, to understand yourself, to understand how you respond to certain things, and just be sure that you know yourself. All right. Number two, people who are emotionally healthy have got what we call emotional agility. Okay, they are emotionally active. They quickly adjust to situations. They quickly adapt to changes in the environment. They will face setbacks, and they will quickly identify those setbacks and quickly begin to marshal ways forward. Right? They quickly begin to ask themselves, what do I do to get out of this messy situation? If the situation is messy, they are quick to identify happenings that are positive in the environment, happenings that they need to entertain, and then so they have that thing that we call emotional agility. They are agile emotionally. They are active, right? They do not take long to adjust to changes that would affect their emotional well-being. Okay, and number three, people who are emotionally healthy have got strong coping mechanisms. And these coping mechanisms are to help them manage especially the negative feelings that we identified, and many others that you can add on that list. Okay, so they have strong coping mechanisms. Okay, they know how to respond. Once they identify that they are angry, they know what to do to diffuse the anger that they are in. They also know that if they entertain this anger, they are likely to behave this way. They are likely to do this thing that probably would escalate the situation to a worse position. And so they also know what to do when that happens. When they realize that they are stressed, they also are very quick to identify whatever it is that is stressing them, and they quickly want to respond to that thing. Okay, and so we say that they are in charge of their emotions. They are in charge of their emotions. Right. It is also important to mention that when you are struggling financially, your emotional well-being is on trial. Your emotional health is at stake. Your emotional health is on test. Okay, when you struggle financially, when you are trapped in debt, your emotional well-being is on trial, is being tested. Okay, and a lot of things happen to demonstrate that your emotional health has been affected. You see, the trap of debt robs you of your positive feelings. Okay, the trap of debt has got the capacity to rob you of the positive feelings that we mentioned. Okay, many times the trap of debt makes people begin to feel deprived of those positive feelings. People begin to feel less happy. People begin to feel less joy. People begin to feel less excited. People begin to feel less enthusiastic. People begin to be robbed of positive energy when they're struggling financially, right? And that's why it is necessary for you to be cautious, especially where your money is concerned, because the trap of debt is bound to leave you at a worse place, especially where your emotions are concerned. The trap of debt has got the tendency to surround you with negative emotions. Negative emotions, all right? And that's not a very interesting thing, all right, to think for yourself. People who are trapped in debt are easily angered. Easily angered. If you're trapped in debt, things that you ordinarily would have smiled about, laughed off, these days they anger you. They get you infuriated. They get you vexed up. They get you wanting to get into action. These guys will begin to pick fights over nothing. Okay. When I'm speaking about the effects of the trap of debt on your career, I have said many times that people who are trapped in debt will pick a fight even when a colleague moves a file from one corner of their desk to the other corner. They pick a fight. The file has not disappeared. The file is still within vicinity. They can see it. It's still on their desk. But just because a colleague was passing and for whatever reason, they moved the file from this corner to this other corner of the desk, the guys begin to pick fights from those occurrences. And people will be wondering, what has happened to this guy? I thought this is just something that can easily be handled. You can just simply move the file back to where it is supposed to be. All right, you can quickly just move the file to where it was without necessarily picking a fight. But people who get themselves trapped in debt begin to realize that they get angered easily. And I have encountered situations where financial challenges have made people to get angered, to even get physical. When I'm dealing with couples, I've met situations where couples have gotten physical because of things that started that would ordinarily look very small. Okay, but they allowed them to escalate, and because one of them was angered for whatever reason during that time, and they felt like this was something that they needed to fight about, and that becomes a very serious thing that needs to be handled. When people are trapped in debt, when people are struggling financially, they get confused. Okay, they get confused because there are very many demands that are coming to them. There are very many demands that are facing them financially. They need to make decisions. They need to meet financial obligations. Okay, school fees is looking at them, rent is looking at them, very many other things are looking at them, but they don't have the money to address those things, and that confuses them. Those people, many of them get disappointed, like I mentioned, because things don't seem to work the way they need to work. Many of them get distressed, get in stress, because demands are bigger than they can supply, right? Many of them are afraid of what would happen to them in the days to come, and that becomes something that is disturbing to them. Many of them are full of bitterness because things are not happening the way they're supposed to be happening, and that leaves them at a bad state. Many of them are sad because life is not moving, sad because they're not able to meet their financial obligations, sad because their children are looking at them and probably they're not able to even provide for what their children are asking for. Okay, remember I mentioned that when you're trapped in debt, you are worse than a broke person. And that leaves you at a very, very awkward position. And that can easily make you sad. Some of the people who are trapped in debt and struggling financially feel bored with life. Okay, many of them tell me this life is boring, it's too boring. When I get to sit with them at the debt clinic, many of them will speak of how boring things seem to them. Okay, and that is something that is of great concern. Many of them will feel pain. Okay, many of them will feel pain just because life to them does not seem to have or to make a lot of sense. Many of them might begin to hate on others, especially if those others contributed to where they are financially today, right? And that begins to become a very dangerous position for them to be in. Okay, so hatred is also bound to be part of them. Many of them might be tempted to also become jealous of other people, because when the stories of other people around them are making sense and their own stories are not making sense, some of them might be tempted, those that are not emotionally healthy might be tempted to start feeling jealous about other people. So you begin to see how the trap of death begins to endear negative feelings to you, begins to bring negative feelings to you, and that begins to affect you. Okay, and so that is something that must be treated with the urgency that it deserves. Now, on the point of anger, especially where family is concerned, I mentioned that many couples have actually been fighting because of things that ordinarily would not be reasons for people to fight. And when I'm speaking to couples about this thing, I like giving this example, especially to men, when I begin to mention to them that when you are trapped financially, when you're trapped in debt, when you get home in the evening, you begin to respond to statements. Okay, English dictates that we don't answer statements, we only answer questions. But when you are trapped in debt because your emotions have been affected, you begin to answer to statements. Okay, so you get home and your spouse makes a very innocent statement, very innocent. A statement like, unga imeisha. Unga imeisha. It's a very simple statement, very innocent statement. It does not require you to answer to it. It's not a question. But because of where you are financially, because of how that has affected your emotional well-being, you begin to respond to that statement. You begin to even set new questions and begin to answer those new questions yourself. You begin to ask them, kwani unga inachukua siku ngapi kwa hii nyumba? You guys have started feeding neighbors without my permission. Chances are very high that unga is still taking the same number of days it has taken. But just because that statement was made at your emotional low moment, you have started overreacting, and that begins to create a mess from something that ordinarily would just pass as an ordinary statement. If you've met people who are overreacting because of small things, probably they are also facing financial challenges. You just need to check around. You might discover and you might be able to help them. All right. Married couples have also been affected because of this emotional turmoil that occurs because of financial issues, right? Because of financial challenges, communication has been affected in marriage in a very big way. Okay, because people are constantly thinking about their debt situation. They don't even have room to communicate and connect with each other. Okay, we are busy thinking about bills. We are busy thinking about what we will tell the landlord or the other person we owe money. And because of those thoughts that are crowding our space, we don't have space to communicate. So we don't have quality communication between couples, and that begins to eat into their marriage, right? We also have guys who don't have the ability to concentrate at home, right? Because your mind is absent. Remember what I said last week, you become absent-minded when you're struggling financially. And that becomes a very serious thing, because you get home, you are physically present, but you are mentally absent, you are emotionally absent. And because of that lack of concentration, then you are not able to give your marriage the attention that it needs. And that begins to affect things. Okay, in worst situations, we've also encountered situations of sexlessness, because when the mind has gone and things are not happening the way they're bound to happen, conversations of conjugal rights will not be able to make sense to such a person. These are things that happen in these houses. These are things that happen in our lives. Okay. Many times I've liked imagining that if bedroom walls had ears, and if they had mouths to tell us the tales that they encounter, then we would be able to have a picture of how these things begin to affect us with regard to our marriages. I'm just looking at a comment here. Now, someone here is saying that there's a new one that has come. Sorry. Someone is saying that this emotional conversation is making more sense than I ever imagined it did. Thank you so much. Someone is saying you just described my marriage there. And this is the message that I was looking at. Thank you so much for just making this relevant to us, for confirming that indeed what we are talking about is what is happening on the ground. Thank you so much. Probably you might need to feel free to inbox more should you want us to talk about this later on, and we can give it the attention it deserves. Someone says, thank you so much for this heart-touching conversation. Someone is saying, today I am dumbfounded. Wow, whatever that means. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. It is also important to mention that people who are struggling financially may not be able to supply emotional needs to the people around them. Okay, because if you are also ailing emotionally, you cannot give what you don't have. And so that means the people around them also begin to suffer emotionally because they are deprived of their emotional needs. There is a video here that I call the family. Okay, the family, the essence of the family. In that video, I have mentioned that the family is the first place where emotional needs are supplied to all of us who are members of families. The family becomes the first place where emotional needs are supplied. And in that video, I single out 3 major emotional needs that all human beings have, what psychologists have called the 3 A's, and that is affection, attention, and affirmation. All human beings crave for these needs, and in the absence of them, then we have what we call an emotional vacuum. And because nature hates vacuums, people begin to look for these needs, satisfaction of these needs elsewhere. And that's why we and how we begin to see marriages begin to suffer, because people have grown emotionally apart. Okay, emotionally apart because there is no supply of emotional needs. And because we are human beings and we are emotional beings, that vacuum has to be filled somehow. And that is how we begin to warm up to people who purport to be in a position to supply those emotional needs. And that's how infidelity begins to set in, because at the house level, at the family level, there was a gap, right? And this gap was created probably by financial struggles. And because we are not actively present, because we are absent-minded, because we are not concentrating, we are not able to supply emotional needs, and therefore we begin to drift apart. And I'm sure you've heard very many people saying we are emotionally disconnected, right? And so when people begin to become emotionally disconnected, that begins to affect the marriage, that begins to affect the family unit. This disconnection is not just about those people who are married, it's also about parents and their children. If parents are struggling financially and they're not able to concentrate on parenting and be able to supply emotional needs to their children, there's also a gap that begins to ensue, a gap that begins to happen between parents and their children, on the other hand, and that begins to affect the entire parenting situation. That begins to confuse the family even more, because these children begin to crave for something or someone that can fill the emotional voids that occur in them. And sometimes that's how they begin to find friends that probably would lead them into bad things, because those friends purport to be in a position to fill the emotional vacuums, voids that are happening in their lives. And that's how some of them find themselves in wrong hands. That's how some of them get easily recruited into crime. That's how some of them get easily radicalized into terrorism, because the other person is promising to fill a void that parents left existing in the lives of these children's emotional well-being, right? So people who are struggling financially may not be able to effectively show affection. Okay, suddenly they forget to remind you how they love you. They don't even have the strength to say such things. So those things begin to lose meaning in their lives, okay? Suddenly they find it very heavy for them to open their mouths and tell you how they love you. They might have done that in the past, but suddenly you realize they have stopped doing it. And we will start hearing cries that this person suddenly changed. We don't know where his attention suddenly is. It's because financial struggles have crowded their minds and they are no longer able to give what they ought to give at the family level. And that begins to be another serious thing that affects them. So probably they also get to a point where they feel society does not love them, does not show them enough affection. People don't seem to understand them. And for that reason, they're also deprived. They have nothing to give. Right? So they will not show affection to their children. They will not show affection to their spouses because they don't have that time. They don't have the ability. They start associating money with everything. And because they don't have the money, they feel they don't have the capacity to do certain things. They don't have the capacity to demonstrate love. They don't have capacity to speak out things that would show affection. They start depriving their family of simple things like quality hugs, quality conversation that would show that indeed there is affection in this family, right? If you've not had chance to listen to that conversation at your free time, look for the video that is called The Essence of the Family, okay? And it is on this channel, and you'll be able to get a better understanding of the relevance of the family unit in our lives, and therefore you can be able to plug this conversation into that one and see how when you are financially struggling, it becomes dangerous for you. People who are struggling financially will also not be able to show attention, okay, because they're absent-minded. They can't give attention. They will not give attention to their spouses. They'll not give attention to their children, all right? They will be seated there and physically present, but they are absent. Their children are calling on their attention. They are trying to call them daddy, daddy, mommy, 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 but they cannot until they cannot give attention until the children have to come pinch them and call them to order. And that begins to also develop the distance that I have just mentioned. And then lastly, people who are trapped in debt and struggling financially may not be able to give affirmation. And we all crave for affirmation. We all want someone to tell us how smartly dressed we are. We want someone to tell us how good we have performed. We want someone to tell us how mannered we are. We want someone to just compliment us in a positive way, someone to affirm us, someone to confirm that that this that we believe is good is indeed good. When that misses in our lives, we begin to oscillate in the direction where we see that someone is promising to do that for us. Okay, so people who are struggling financially may not have time to give affirmations, and that begins to be dangerous, especially at a family level. People who are struggling financially will also have a challenge with their self-esteem. Many of them begin to have their self-esteem eroded. They begin to feel less important in society, less important in their lives. Okay, people who are struggling financially begin to isolate themselves. They begin to ask themselves questions like, nikikanyaga nyanya za wenyewe, and so they just want to stay with themselves. They forget that isolation leads to termination. Okay, the moment you start to isolate yourself, that's the moment you get prone to temptation. That's the moment you get to entertain thoughts of suicide. Many people who have confessed suicide, when I'm having conversations with them, they have told me that happened especially when they were alone and when they had nothing to do and when they felt that life didn't make meaning. And because they are alone and they have a lot of time with themselves and they're not thinking anything constructive, they start entertaining those thoughts. And that's just how dangerous those negative feelings can become. All right, and the obvious is that people who are struggling financially are stressed. And I think I've also mentioned that when I was giving examples of negative feelings. Okay, people who are struggling financially are constantly stressed. They are feeling emotional tension. Okay, emotional tension. In some cases, they'll also feel physical tension. The demands from society are bigger than they can supply, especially because of financial constraints, and that becomes a serious thing. By the way, I think I will make a live session again. There's a new show that is coming where I will be talking to you about different life skills. And that show will begin with what I had promised you last time. And that was the conversation of self-drive, especially how self-drive affects people in employment, how it affects your job hunting, and then how it affects your ability to sustain your job, right? Then later on, I will also talk to you briefly about stress, okay, about stress. But let me just mention in passing here that we have two kinds of stresses, and we have the acute stress and the chronic stress. Acute stress is the short-term stress, that which happens when sudden things happen in our lives that are not pleasant, but those things are short-term. Like when it starts raining and you are standing waiting for your matatu, right? Standing waiting for your taxi, but you didn't carry an umbrella. It starts raining. That means the environment is demanding more than you can supply, and that causes you stress. That is acute stress. The effects of acute stress will build very fast, but then they also die very quickly. Okay, scholars have largely agreed that acute stress will not last more than 1 month. Okay, but then we have the chronic stress. This is the long-term stress that stays with you for a very long time, and this is the stress that is highly likely to sink you into depression. Now, chronic stress is caused largely by three things largely. Number one, financial challenges. Number two, marital issues. And number three, workplace challenges. You realize those three things stay with you for long. Okay, your financial situation is going to be with you, right? Money powers our life. So there is no day we can say, I have stopped being an economically active or economically affected person. Okay, so you realize money conversations will be crowding your space for a long time. So if you're struggling financially, that means if that is your stressant, then you're going to be with this stress for a very long time until you do something about it. Number two, marital challenges. Okay, if you're married and you've said for better, for worse, or whatever it is that you've said in your marriage, you begin to realize that it is not easy for you to wake up and just say, I'm quitting marriage, right? So until whatever it is that is causing you stress at the marriage level is addressed, that means that stress is bound to be with you for a long, for a long period of time. And lastly, workplace. Until you change this job, if your job is the source of your stress, and that means that stress is going to be with you for a long time. And that is chronic stress. Just mentioning in passing, but there's a day I will give you greater, finer details about these two kinds of stresses in the days to come. That show will start this coming week. We were not able to start this week because of something that was happening on our YouTube channel from YouTube itself. But now that is already done and we are good to go, then from next week we should be able to go live on the same. So be on the lookout. Posters will be out to just talk about the same. So that then you can also be able to plug in if you have people who've been looking for jobs long enough and they haven't been finding them. Probably there is something about their self-drive that puts off employers during interviews or during their job applications. And those are some of the things we'll be looking at. Right, so just before I finish, allow me to suggest to you what to do about this situation, all right? And I will not tell you many things. I will just tell you two things. Number one, you need to deal with the stressant. And in this case, if your stressant is financial challenges, you need to find ways out. You need to find ways of breaking free from the trap of debt. All right. The good thing is that now that we have started this conversation, we will not stop this conversation of financial challenges, of the trap of debt, until we also talk about breaking free from the trap of debt. All right, so keep it here. We will definitely create a day when we will talk in details about the trap of debt and how to break from it. So for now, we are building the case and just appreciating how we have found ourselves where we are and the effects of this thing. For those who are not yet there, they can quickly begin to avoid. So you have to deal with the stress and address your money story. Try as much as you can to make sure that you begin to manage your money properly. And if you don't know how to go about it, number two, I'm suggesting that you need to seek for help. There are two kinds of help that you need to look for here. Number one is you might need to look for psychological help, especially if you have been affected to a very big level. You've been affected to a level that you are not able to handle yourself. You might need to look for counseling so that then your emotional stability can begin to come to a better point. And then secondly, you might need financial counseling. You might need to sit with financial experts, speak to them about your debt situation, and we will be glad to help you on your journey of breaking free from the trap of debt. That's what I do at the debt clinic every other day, just sitting one-on-one with people, listening to them, individuals and couples and guys in business, and just helping them to see ways out of their debt situations. So you might need to seek for those two kinds of help. Thank you so much. I can see our time is coming to an end, but let me just appreciate a few inbox messages here. Someone is saying that they don't know why they logged in this day, but today's message was meant for them. The person is saying that they believe that no one has gained more than them. Wow. Right. Thank you so much. Someone is saying that this was their message. Thank you. Thank you so much. Someone is saying emotional conversations must be held everywhere. These days, we see many people suffering emotionally, and that's why we see even people having emotional outbursts. Yes. Thank you so much for that. Someone is saying that it's unfortunate the show is coming to an end, but I have learned a lot. Someone is saying, I am flipping the pages of my notebook. I have written a lot today. Thank you so much for finding time to be with us on this other comment section. Great learnings right there. That's from my sweetheart. Mutembe, I can see you. Good one. Thank you so much for finding time to be with us. As usual, if you're new here, please create a moment and hit the subscription button so that every time we go live, remember also to hit the notification bell. You are notified so that you are not left behind. Every time we upload a new video, you are able to join us so that we can continue to learn together. Feel free, if you have loved this conversation, to hit the like button. Feel free to share this video with other people in your circles so that they can also be able to join this conversation so that we can be transformed together. Right. So this conversation is still going on. Next Saturday, we progress the conversation and we begin to look at the effects of financial struggles on your social well-being. How does it affect your social person, right? How does it affect you with regard to socialization, right? How does it affect you in your relationships? Okay, and so we will also be doing justice to that particular conversation Saturday, same place and same time. So thank you so much for keeping me company. My timer tells me that it is 9 on the clock, East African time. Thank you so much for keeping me company. May God bless you. May God keep you safe until we meet again. Be on the lookout for the new show that is coming up from next week. And until we meet again, it is bye-bye from me.